Right. Welcome everyone to today's lecture. Today is the 43rd day, and we are continuing with this week is the 9th week. The topic for this week is drafting of delegated legislation, subsidiary legislation. Every jurisdiction has the name they call subsidiary legislation. You just need to check the Interpretation Act of your jurisdiction to find out what is the name. The reason we have subsidiary legislation is that there are certain details that cannot be contained in the primary legislation. And then with time, new circumstances may arise that need to be dealt with. You use subsidiary legislation to deal with that. The practice in Lesotho is that subsidiary legislation, when it's drafted, is laid before Parliament. And within 15 days, Parliament can accept or decline accept. And if it is accepted, it's published in the Gazette. This is a procedure in Lesotho. In Nigeria, subsidiary legislation is drafted by the minister or whoever is in charge, and then it is gazetted. Gazette is published by the Federal Ministry of Justice of Nigeria. The date of the Gazette is the date when the subsidiary legislation becomes legally effective. This is based on the Supreme Court judgment of Igoro versus University of Lagos, 1985. So these are the procedures for subsidiary legislation in Lesotho, in Nigeria. In the United Kingdom, they have a general practice. They call it laying before Parliament, just as you have in Lesotho. However, the difference, there's a fundamental difference. In the United Kingdom, they have what they call Henry VIII clause. Some legislation, not all, some have what they call Henry VIII clause. Henry VIII clause is a provision inside a law, or the primary legislation, which gives power to the minister to amend the legislation without laying it before Parliament. So the minister can amend the law without the necessity of laying before Parliament. So this is the difference in the United Kingdom. So we said the Interpretation Act has different names for subsidiary legislation depending on your jurisdiction. In Nigeria, it's called statutory instruments. The general name, statutory instruments. In the United Kingdom, it's also called statutory instruments. I notice in Lesotho it's called regulations. Now, there are other types of subsidiary legislation, such as proclamation. In our constitution in Nigeria, we have what is proclamation. The president can proclaim a state of emergency. So that's an example of a delegated legislation. Then you have the rules of courts. Rules are another name or species of subsidiary legislation. They are made pursuant to the High Court Rule, Court of Appeal Act, Supreme Court Act. Any rule made by the chief judge of that division of the court is called rules of court. They are a kind of subsidiary legislation. So these are the general things you need to know about subsidiary legislation. Now, we said today some differences between subsidiary legislation and the primary legislation. One difference is the enacting clause, enacting formula. Remember, when you did mathematics, you always hear formula, formula. Formula is a set of rules that govern how something is done. So in legislative drafting, the enacting formula means what is the legislative authority making that law, that piece of legislation. For subsidiary legislation is different. The way you draft it is different from primary legislation. So one example of a species of subsidiary legislation is bylaws. Bylaws are the laws made by local government assemblies. Bylaws, the spelling is B-Y-E, then dash law. So let me write it in the chat box. Bylaw. Bylaw is a law made by a local government council. That is how it's spelled. Now, the enacting formula for a bylaw is different. It's not the same as primary legislation. So primary legislation, yes, come in. Come in. So a bylaw is made by a local government's legislative assembly. The enacting formula is different. For primary legislation, the enacting formula, if it's Lesotho, enacted by the Parliament of Lesotho. In Nigeria, the National Assembly enacts as follows, and you put dash or colon. Now, a bylaw, the enacting formula is different. Because remember, a bylaw or subsidiary legislation derives its power from a primary legislation. So when you're drafting a bylaw, you have to cite, remember when we did miscellaneous provisions, usually it's section 23. Section 23 creates power to make regulations. So when you're drafting the enacting formula for the bylaw, you have to refer to the primary legislation, that section. You don't just say the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Act. No, you say section 23 of the NNPC Act. By virtue of powers conferred. So this is an example of, usually, because there's somebody that makes the bylaw, you have to name the person. The person has to name his position and his name. So let me give you an example. I, Dr. Tony Clinton Jaja, Minister of Petroleum, I hope I'm spelling it well, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, by virtue of powers conferred on me by Section 3 of the Petroleum Act 19, what was Petroleum Act was what, 1967, do hereby enact the Petroleum Downstream petrol stations registration regulations. 2025 as follows. So this is your typical bylaw. Yes. So this is an example of a regulation. This is how a regulation would be. Enacting formula. Now, for bylaws made by local governments, there are two types of bylaws. In Nigeria, when a local government is headed by democratically elected councillors, councillors are the legislators at the local government level, then the enacting formula will be as follows. The Berea local government, okay, here they call it districts, government, the Berea districts, local government legislative assembly hereby enacts. So this is it. For when a local government is made up of democratically elected persons. Now in Nigeria, the Constitution, Section 7, there's a requirement. Local governments, each state must pass a local government law. That's what they call it. It is that local government law that is the primary legislation from which local governments derive power to make bylaws. So in Nigeria, the enacting formula for any this thing would read as follows. For a bylaw would be, for example, Karu, local, what's happening? Karu, local government area legislative council pursuant to section 5 of the Nasarawa States Local Government Law number 5 of 2004. The Karu Local Government Area Council hereby enacts the market stall allocation bylaws as follows. So this is an enacting formula for Karu. Wait, I don't know what I pressed. The thing is now showing. Okay. So this is when a local government is headed by democratically elected councillors. Councillors are the lawmakers, legislators for the local government. Now, in the event that there are caretaker chairmen, then the enacting formula for bylaws will change. It will now be, remember, you have to name the person. I, Dr. Tony Clinton Jaja, chairman of Karu Local government area of Nasarawa State by virtue of powers conferred upon me by Section 5 of the Nasarawa State Local Government Area Law Number 5, 2003, hereby enacts the market stall allocation bylaws as follows. So have a look at it. These are the differences depending on the type of government that's in place. So this last one is for when there is a caretaker government, local government, caretaker. Okay. So this enacting formula is very important. You must refer to the primary legislation where you get the power from. Any questions? Any questions?
I can't see the example of the last one you drafted.
Is what?
I said I can't see the example of the last one you drafted of the caretaker committee in the chat box. I thought you would drop it.
Is there? Can any other person see it? Oscar, you put it. Confirm if you can see it.
I can see it now.
Okay.
I've seen it, yes. Maybe my network was a bit slow.
Okay. All right, so this is it. The enacting formula, just as you do mathematics, there's a formula x minus y times this. The formula is that when you're drafting delegated legislation, subsidiary legislation, you must refer to the section of the primary legislation that gives power to make regulations. And as we saw in miscellaneous provisions, that's where you find power to make regulations. So you must refer to it. Remember, enacting formula means if you get that formula wrong, the legislative authority, where on the basis of which is the basis of that law, Lord Denning said in UAC versus McFoy, you cannot put something upon nothing and expect it to stand. So if you do not get this enacting formula right, the whole law crumbles. So you must take time to draft the enacting formula. Very important. Before you go to any other part of the law. We said subsidiary legislation broadly has 4 parts, just as the primary legislation. However, there are some differences. So today we are focusing on the enacting formula, which is the major difference between primary legislation and subsidiary legislation. The enacting formula is not the same. It's not the same. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? So let me ask a question. What would be the enacting formula for the High Court Civil Procedure Rules of Lesotho? Yes. Let's ask.
It is the Chief Justice, Prof.
So can you read how the enacting formula read? Who can couch it? Even from Nigeria. If you have a copy of the High Court Civil Procedural Rules, who can read the enacting formula?
No, Prof.
Yes.
I have High Court Civil Litigation Rules 2024.
Yes.
I think this should be enacting clause. It reads as thus: prescribed by the Chief Justice under sections 22, sub 6, section 69, sub 5, and 131A of the Constitution of Lesotho, 1993, read with section 16 of the High Court Act
No,
number
that's
5 of 1978.
check well. You will see the enacting formula. Don't think you're reading the enacting formula.
So this is not the enacting formula.
How does it read? Can you snap it and post on the chat box? Let's see.
Okay, let me try.
Okay. Legal notice number. This is prescribed by the under sections. Okay. Can somebody from Nigeria? Yes, Shetak. Share with us your Nigerian.
Yes, Prof. I'm looking at the Plateau State High Court of Justice Civil Procedure Rules 2020, and I can't find any enacting formula. I'm hoping it's not elsewhere, but it just goes straight to other one.
No,
Till
check the last page.
last page.
Mm.
Okay.
Anybody from Abuja be checking the Abuja rules, the new ones that 2025 rules that the Civil High Court, FCT.
Prof, the last page just says these rules shall come into effect on the 30th day of November 2020, made at the High Court of Plateau State this 5th day of October 2020. Then the then Chief Judge's signature, and after that are the forms.
You see what we're saying about drafting. When drafting is not done by professionals, so they have no idea the structure of subsidiary legislation. Yes, Oscar, you raised your hand. Mm-hmm. Mm. Formula, inactive. Mhm. Excellent. Olumuyiwa, your hand was up, yes?
Yes, with regards to Ogun State, the enacted formula is there at the back. It says, in exercise of the powers conferred by the subsection 1 of section 52 of the High Court Law of Ogun State, and of all other powers enabling in that behalf, the following rules of court are hereby made by the Chief Judge of Ogun State, of the Executive Council of Ogun State. Then it says the rules may be cited as the High Court Civil Procedure Rules 2024 and shall come in force. The signature made on so date, and then the signature of the Honorable Chief Judge.
Excellent. That's excellent. Notice what they said. What they've done, they've lumped everything together. The short title is the rules shall be cited as. It's supposed to be separate, either in the preliminary or in the final, depending on your in-house style. So from these, we are learning that a lot of these things are not tidy because the drafters are not professional legislative drafters. They may have copied from existing without knowing that everything has its place. A legislation is like a building. You have the roof, you have the foundation. That's why we say every legislation has 4 parts: preliminary, principal, miscellaneous, and final provisions. Every of these has its place. So imagine building a building, you don't put roof, you just rush and put the walls. So when rain comes, it pours into the house. So this is what you are seeing in these High Court rules. And then another thing you need to know, a particular subsidiary legislation may have 2 sources of primary legislation that gives it power. So for example, these High Court rules, if you read the one of Rivers State, in addition to the High Court, Rivers State High Court laws, the Constitution also empowers the Chief Judge of every state to make rules for court. So when you are drafting in accordance with section so of the state High Court law, you also cite and section so of the Constitution, because those are the two primary legislation that gives power to the chief judge to make the rules. Yes, Olamo, your hand is up again. Hello, Olamuyiwa. Your hand is up.
Oh, sorry. I had I think it was the last.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. No problem. So these are technical details that you know now that the average lawyer does not know. Even the chief judge, because the chief judge is an expert in litigation, judge adjudication. That's why they draft these things without knowing the structure, how it should be. One of the states, the chief judge put the enacting formula as the last. So it doesn't work that way. Enacting formula is the first. It shows you the legislative authority on which that law is made. So the purpose, remember, keep remembering the purpose of this lecture, to elevate yourself from a mechanic to an automobile engineer. So after this formal training, you cannot be at the same level as you were when we started this course. And of course, what we are even teaching you is just the basics. Those who are doing our diploma program, those who are doing the master's program, we teach more than this. There are other details about this. So if some of these laws, like Plateau State, if it was a litigation state like Lagos State, one of these activists would have sued the chief judge and say this law is not properly made. Therefore, lawyers cannot abide by these civil procedure rules. So it's important to draft laws according to the rules, the conventions. The enacting formula is a very, I can share with you, I was a consultant to a state. I will not name the state's House of Assembly. They were drafting laws without enacting formula. So the Attorney General, I told him, do you know that if your state was a litigation state like Lagos, all the laws from when the assembly was sworn in, all the laws you have been passing without enacting formula, that means there's no legal basis for those laws. You have wasted your time. So it's important. It's important. Now, what has happened in Lesotho is they have just written, yes, it's not just, look at what the prescribed by the Chief Justice under sections 2, he now listed, of the Constitution, and section 16 of the High Court Act number 5 of 1978. Yes, he has written all this. However, it is not couched as an enacting formula. He ought to have said, he says his name, because his name now appears in the signature part at the end. He also wrote where the legal notice, that is the gazette where it's published, the High Court Civil Litigation Rules 2024, prescribed by the Chief Justice under blah, 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 blah. So, but this is not the way enacting formula is drafted. Yes, he has followed the procedure. He has published it in the Gazette as legal notice number 65 of 2024. That's correct. But the way he has drafted it, prescribed by Chief Justice under section, well, maybe this is their style, but ideally he should say I. He names his name, and then pursuant to sections blah, blah, blah of the Constitution. This is well drafted because he referred to the sections of the Constitution and the High Court Act where the Chief Justice has power to make rules for courts. So this is well, that part is well captured, but it's not couched as the way enacting formulas should be couched for subsidiary legislation. So this is something important, very important. And I hear in Lesotho, it is the Prime Minister that appoints whoever is the mayor of the districts. So it means that laws are passed by the mayor, mayor so, by virtue of, you now cite the part of the Constitution that gives the Prime Minister power to appoint the mayor of each district. Yes, Shetak.
Yes, sir. While I'm going through that piece of regulation, I looked through the back and I also found out that it has two interpretation sections. One at the beginning, immediately after citation and commencement, and then another one at the end, which is the last section of that regulation. So I don't know if there is any legal implication to that.
That's strange. That's strange. What year is that law, the rules?
2020, Prof.
That's strange. I've never seen that kind of. So the one at the beginning, how lengthy is it? The interpretation section.
The one at the beginning is maybe like a page and a bit.
Okay, how does it begin? Does it say in these rules, so and so means?
It says these rules shall be interpreted in accordance with the interpretation laws for the time being in force in Plateau State. Then where in these rules, written statements on oath and affidavits are required, if the deponent does not understand English language, such statement or affidavit shall be interpreted into English language and filed together with the original version made in vernacular. Then it goes on to 3. In the construction of these rules, unless there is anything in the subject or context repugnant thereto, the several words hereinafter mentioned or referred to shall have or include the following meanings. Then it goes on to give meanings to some words.
This is strange. Look at when you even say shall have or include. Now, we didn't talk about definitions because we didn't dwell much. Definitions, there are two ways to couch definitions. In this act, vehicle means, that one is when you want to restrict the meaning of a word. Then the second way to couch definition is when you want a broad, in this act, vehicle shall include, then in quotation marks, you start listing all the things you want vehicle to include. Trailers, motor cars, motorcycles, bicycles. So those are the two ways of dealing with definitions. And remember, in drafting, we have conventions. If you leave these two ways, you cannot. So what Plateau State is doing is strange. For these rules to say, so and so shall have the meaning to include, it's like having two forms of. Okay, go to the last part of the definition. How does it read?
Okay, the last one says, unless the context otherwise requires, for the purpose of orders 61 to 64, then authorized officer means any officer of the registry who is for the time being authorized by law to administer any oath or to take any affidavit required for any purpose connected with his duties. Then he also defines gross values, oath, personal applicant, registrar, registry,
No,
probate.
no, I think you're mixing it up. The definition is the one at the front. This one is because of this section. They want to clarify the meaning of certain things.
Okay, but the side notes both say interpretation.
You see now, this is the problem of the drafter. The drafter should have said interpretation of section so of the rules. This is not the general interpretation. It is specified. This section, that's what the interpretation is. So you could tell, like what I heard is in this kingdom of Lesotho, because the Chief Justice used to be a drafter, he drafted the rules himself, these High Court rules. Before he became Chief Justice, he was an experienced drafter, so he could draft it himself. So he did not use the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, or they were complaining. And you can see some of the things we are pointing out. The enacting formula, he drafted it the way he believed. And maybe this was a style when he was years ago as a law officer in that area. So these are the challenges. These are the challenges. You have to be careful. But you have the opportunity, those of you that work in Law Reform Commission, when you come across pieces of legislation like this, then it is your duty to bring it to the attention of the government. Look, this does not comply with our drafting style. We need to deal with just this. You amend it to suit the in-house drafting style of your government. So these are small things, but these are the things that make the difference. Shows your expertise in this area of law. You can see the chief judges who have drafted these rules, they have no idea. They just think, I'm a chief judge. I've been in the game of law for how many years? Without knowing that legislative drafting is a different kettle of fish. So we have taken today to look at just the enacting formula, because the enacting formula for subsidiary legislation is completely different from the enacting formula for primary legislation. And we have seen the difference. Any other questions? 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 So you may wish to look at, or tomorrow, we can look for other subsidiary legislation to see whether they are well drafted. To see.
No, Prof.
Yes.
I have something from South Africa on the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
Can you have a look and see if it qualifies for a proper enacting formula?
Okay. The Rules Board for Courts of Law has under section blah blah blah, with the approval of the Minister of Justice, made the rules in the schedule. Okay. Yes, this is good because it says it names who is making the rule under, it names the, it doesn't name the, okay, section 6. Yeah, that's good. With the approval of the, good, that's good. It's well drafted. I can tell you South Africa has a good drafting office. I have interacted with some of their, in fact, South Africa is very advanced. Apart from drafting in English, they draft in their official languages, including Sesotho. In fact, they advertise for a lawyer to work in their parliament. They call it legal editor. So when laws are drafted, the editor will convert to Sesotho, because Sesotho is one of the official languages of South Africa. So they are very advanced in their drafting. They are very good. They are very good. In Nigeria, there's a provision in the constitution that laws should be drafted in the 3 official languages. Caveat is when proper arrangement is made. And since independence, no such arrangement has been made by the National Assembly. So laws are only in English. Whereas the constitution says the 3 official languages, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa. Well, we don't get that. But South Africa, I think they have 7 official languages, and each of their laws are translated into the official languages. Canada also has that as a mandatory requirement. Every law is translated into English and French, which is the official languages of Canada. Okay, any other questions? Any other question? Any other questions? Any questions? Okay, if we don't have any questions, tomorrow we'll look at another major difference between subsidiary legislation and the primary legislation, the date of commencement. With primary legislation, the general rule is that the commencement date is the date when the chief executive, governor, president, king, the date of assent. But with subsidiary legislation is different. In Lesotho, the date of commencement of subsidiary legislation is different. In Nigeria, the date of commencement of subsidiary legislation is also different. It is not the date when the chief executive signs. So tomorrow we'll discuss that. Look for subsidiary legislation in Lesotho and in Nigeria. Look for the commencement dates and let's discuss it tomorrow. All right, thank you for your time. Tomorrow we continue. Was there any new person that needed? Yes. Olumiwewa, we have a tradition to introduce yourself, tell us where you logged in from, and then how you heard about the lecture. You have to put on your video.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olumiwa Ogunsanwo. I'm from Ministry of Justice, Ogun State. So I've been a member of ALDRAP. all along.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see your video. We normally require to see you.
Sorry, I didn't get you, sir.
We need to see your video, just briefly.
Oh, okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Now,
Thank you.
you said you joined. When did you join? But this is my first time of seeing you on the platform.
I since you came to do, I think that was 2021. Yes, during the former Attorney General's, I didn't know.
Oh, okay, okay. When we did the in-house training.
Yes.
All right, all right. Well done.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Vincent Adodo, please put on your video, introduce yourself to the class. Mr. Vincent Adodo.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, we need to see your video. Briefly introduce yourself. Where are you logging in from and what do you intend to benefit?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, you need to click on the video icon to show us your video. Just briefly.
Okay. Actually, I'm in the house and I'm not too.
Okay, okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But all the same, I will. Yes, I think you can see my face now, sir.
Oh, yes, yes. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Vincent Adodo. I practice law in the Federal Capital Territory and the surrounding states, including Nasarawa, where I reside.
Okay.
So I joined the group today for the first time, and the link is your good self. I follow your posts on the Law Center, that's a WhatsApp platform, a prominent WhatsApp platform,
Okay.
where we have a lot of legal luminaries and shining lights in the legal profession in Nigeria. So
Okay.
today I chatted you up privately to inquire about how I can become a member of the ALDRAP, and you shared this link to this meeting with me. So I'm happy to be here, and I would say that I've learned something new today. So thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome. Thank you. So every day between 12 to 1 Nigerian time, we do this lecture virtually. You will see the link, you click, you join.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining. So tomorrow we hope to see you again. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you
Enjoy.
very much.
Thank you, Prof.